We got Horace Wormely, my big bro from another mother, on the podcast again. He was on the first season ever during COVID when I first got on the call with this man, kind of got to know him,
Yeah,
and
good time.
then since then, we still kicking it, still staying in touch, still taking my calls with all the questions I got, me and Julie. So thank you for coming on the podcast again, Horace. You always know it's good whenever we get to have a conversation around all types of topics.
Yes, it's my pleasure, sis. You already know, man. Anytime we get to rap, whether it's podcasts or anything, and we throw Julie in the mix, man, it's always a good fun time. So thank you for
For
having
sure.
me.
There, you know she ain't getting on the podcast. She only want the non-recorded conversation.
Yeah, she
She
business
ducking,
only, man.
yeah, she ducking
Yeah.
everything that's recorded. She's staying incognito for real. But
Oh man, I love it, man. Shout out Julie.
so before we get started, like what's the update with you? What you doing? Obviously, you've been retired. How long now? How many years is it that you've been
Oh
officially
man,
retired?
it's officially 4 years now. Retired in
Okay.
2019, right before the pandemic got going. So, yep, 4 years. It don't feel like it. Feel like I can still get out there and hoop, even though my body be like, "Don't you
Right.
dare try it."
Right.
It don't feel like 4 years has passed.
4 years. So what's been up? What's new within those 4 years? A quick, obviously.
Oh man, yeah, man. I've so pivoted out of business ownership out of the district for a bit. So stepped into TV film production. So I've been working with National Lampoon with their rebrand. So it's like a complete pivot out of basketball, which is something that I was inviting, kind of looking forward to. I've been looking forward to for some time. Place to just kind of a new canvas to be creative, but still moving, shaking business, and really just get out of my comfort zone. So that's been a challenge in a really healthy way.
Hmm.
Learning a ton. So enjoying that, and still got my toes in basketball a bit with FIBA 3-on-3. So shout out to Craig, my man Craig is here, Drive 3x3, and Arian as well for pulling me into this FIBA 3x3 space. I just think that's gonna be something that's gonna be huge over the next 5 to 10 years. Strongly believe in it as the next iteration of basketball. It does so much globally, and you can pretty much compete anywhere with it. So
Hmm.
I won't dig too much into that unless you got questions for it. But those are the two things that I've been involved in. That's new. Those are the updates.
Got you. Got you. I mean, that's a lot in 4 years.
Yeah,
District is huge to
yeah,
get that off
yeah,
and running, and then all the other
yeah,
things. I know there was layer cake. I don't know if you still have
yeah.
that going in the background, but a lot of things you guys have done. I mean, you've been retired for 4 years, so definitely that's commendable, and
Yeah,
that's one of the
yeah,
reasons
I
why.
appreciate it.
Yeah, always just like, man, let me just keep kind of following right behind the Horace for a little bit. So let's just go back a tad during that moment, because I do want to
Yeah.
ask everybody with this segment of the podcast before you got into entrepreneurship. I know I partially know the story already, that you already
Mhm.
had an entrepreneur mindset, the ideas and things you wanted to innovate, you were thinking about while playing. But I want to touch upon when it did become reality, and you were kind of flirting with the
Mm.
things you're going to do after. But when it came time that, okay, I'm not taking a contract, I'm staying at home, that's no longer security blanket. What did that feel like? And were you prepared? Can you be prepared? Or it's really just something that you got to go through?
Man, so I'll start with that that decision, that feeling. I knew about 3 or 4 years, like the idea of retirement. probably started to seep in about 3 or 4 years before I actually did. That was a process in and of itself of just really taking the time and imagining what life without basketball would be like. Um, and so when it came time to actually make the decision, I think I was ready in the sense of my spirit was ready. I was nowhere near as prepared as I would have loved to have been, whether that was financially, which it was. Financially, I wasn't anywhere as prepared as I would have loved to have been. Um, and just understanding what I was getting ready to step into in entrepreneurship fully without basketball, but then also what I was getting ready to step out of, which was just
Mm-hmm.
not having basketball be a part of my life. So it was, I had dabbled in both entrepreneurship when I was playing and obviously playing basketball at the same time, but I hadn't done either of those things without the other. So I wasn't ready for what that would look like. And if I would go back, there's definitely ways I think in my own journey how I would be prepared. Thankfully though, like I said, the place where that I think allowed me to like navigate in a healthy way once I retired was I had already been dabbling in business to some degree, even with my own career, and had mentally prepared for, like, I at least thought about what I wanted to do next
Mm-hmm.
so that I could jump into it, head first like I've done. I've wanted to be I'm a creative at nature, but also wanted to really understand and master business at every level. So entrepreneurship, working with corporations, working with brands, doing that locally as well as internationally. And so trying to put those two things together, I kind of like fancy myself as I did when I was playing an athlete advocate, and I still do. Stepping into this new space or this act two of my life, I still see myself as an advocate for creators at large. So the purpose hasn't changed much, and I think that's above all else, that's what's been uh, what I've been most prepared in, and what has allowed me to just navigate and thankfully catch up to the
Right.
places where I wasn't as prepared. I'm catching up. 'Cause I have great mentors and friends and community, folks and
Right.
tribe like yourself. So yeah,
Got you. So what the things you said
yeah.
there were some things that you think you would have done to be better
hmm
prepared. Like what are some of those things if you did it all over again that you would have done?
Yeah. Specifically, I would have built knowing what I know now about entrepreneurship. I probably would have built a larger nest egg for myself financially with what I made throughout my playing career. Um, I had somewhat of a nest egg, but just underestimated, I believe, what entrepreneurship would ask of me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that definitely would have been something that I would have changed. And I think I would have also, I was coming home during, and this is something that I even learned from you and Jewel, what you guys do. It is something that I envy of you guys is I would have come home and probably um, took that time to let's call it be an apprentice or internship a bit more while I was playing. Uh, Again, because I knew what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I think I may have had opportunities to do, and I just didn't fully invest in that way in the way, with going up under mentors and really learning while I had
Right.
the runway of my career to, still um, take care of all of the basic responsibilities. So those would be the two things, man. Just that again, that nest egg, really stockpiling, because entrepreneurship is no joke. But then also making sure that if you know some accountants or marketers or anybody in the spaces that you want to be in, that especially if they've played and they had to transition, um, get up under their umbrella as quickly as you can while you're playing.
Right. And we know, I mean, definitely, I think since shoot, IU every summer I was working. So I think it's just something
Mm-hmm.
that I
Yeah.
always kind of did. Um,
Yeah.
because it was just something, yeah, just like, hey, I know I got to be prepared as much as possible to put something on a resume. And working in the summer was just a thing I always had to do. And then, of course, I think also just maintaining those expenses in the summer was key. So
Yeah,
working was the next thing to try and at least not go and dabble too much into the money that I was making playing, especially early,
yep.
and just trying to pocket as much as possible. But it's definitely something I think like you said, like you got to do it. Even if you do a few hours, just ask somebody, can I come learn
Hmm.
or do something? I mean, for me, I was working like camps and stuff like that, but I do also wish I would have been able to go in a space and be like, I want to learn more about storytelling and how do they create these
Right.
ads and these concepts in digital marketing, that type of stuff. Those
Right.
things are kind of more so like, how could I have gotten experience in that space? But again, it's more things being created. And so I think more players will get that experience for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
Emotionally,
That's one of my things to make sure those players get it.
yeah, yeah, that is the
Yeah.
key. That is the key. And we're gonna touch
Yeah.
upon just the programs in a bit, but before we transition to like fully being done with ball, of
Hmm.
course they could Google you, see where you've been, all that you really hooped. But what was the emotional part of leaving? And again, for me, I feel it more that it's like,
Hmm.
because even, now it's like I feel it, my motivation, the amount of preparation I have to do to be like, come on, let's go, let's hoop. We about to hoop. Like it's like a lot of work for me to get my mind to that point where I'm like, I know in my heart, I'm like, yeah, it's coming to that end because it's just not
Yeah.
that motivation's not there. But it's also that part of like, dang, you nervous no matter how prepared you think you are to like, dang, what is it gonna be like if I really detach? And so I guess emotionally, what was the emotional journey the first couple years for you?
Man, what's crazy is I'm still on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because and you know this, like it basketball, in order to even make it to any professional level and oftentimes collegiate level, the number of hours that you spent, dedicating your life to basketball, whether like that's not just counting in the gym, that's the Euro steps in the kitchen, that's like,
Mm-hmm.
watching
Right.
game film or just going to watch a niece nephew go hoop. Like we dedicate so much time and attention, uh, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically to basketball. I didn't realize how much, like just how much. Like I can say it and we can write the numbers down and be like, man, I probably spent this number of hours, but until you completely detach, like there's no way that I would have at least known just how
Mm-hmm.
connected I was to basketball, but just how much basketball is like in my veins and just in
Right.
everything that I do and how I view the world and how I learn lessons in life and how I observe just different systems and cultures. Basketball is in every single bit of it. So that is still very much an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first couple years what I was able to do though was detach, like separate my identity, like where I find or found value or where I even found validation. A lot of it did come from basketball, which, saying that it doesn't mean that I got a ton of like fandom and fanfare in that way. But I mean, even the validation from and value from throwing a really good pass or just naturally being around the
Right. Your
game, being with
peers.
being with
Yeah, your peers.
teammates, yeah, being with your peers,
Yeah.
all of it, and like them understanding, you in a completely different way. You don't have that anymore once you play. So that was like the first thing that I really had to adjust to, one, and then also heal from, and just where else will my value, identity, etc. come from. And that was, again, thankfully I was able to kind of start that process well, really early in my professional life, but then like as I started to really feel that same thing you're talking about where, you know, you're not as motivated as you once were to like get up and play every
Mm-hmm.
day. I at least, you know, started writing more. I started journaling. I started to, like I said, tap into my creative side a bit more, and asking questions about production, and just really start more on a soul search, and even using the tail end of my basketball career to kind of help with that. Once I retired, I was able to like jump into a couple things that I was able to find my identity in,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then also that just those things helped me find my identity without anything. So it was a bit of a
Right.
process, but that was what my emotional state and journey was like once I finished.
Yeah. I think the first episode of this series is with Trevor Huffman, Swish House. If you, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you're familiar with it.
Yep, yep.
And he full blown went sailing for a whole year. He didn't know what he was gonna do
Wow.
before he did Swiss House anything. He retired, went sailing, and he was like, it was more of an emotional thing. Like he just really had to heal, detach, and I think all these
Mm-hmm.
athlete transition, we help athletes, and I'm like, man, this is bigger than a resume. Like it's
Right.
something that really is emotional, especially for those of us that have made it so far. Like we started at a very young
Mm-hmm.
age, from AAU grassroots to elite
Yep.
grassroots to college to pro to all over the world. Like you basically grew up with this thing, and it's like I think that element is like something that there is no real solution. I've been kind of thinking about it because
Mm-hmm.
you talk to people, especially with Evolve, like who help athletes transition, and I'm just like, actually, I go back to that thing we
Mm-hmm.
talked about before, like community
Yeah.
health, community mental well-being and health is,
Yes.
that's something, because it's like there is no one-stop shop solution to get through this. I think it's a community thing. It's a thing of saying, yo, all right,
Mm-hmm.
you got some people that already did it. They here. Where you trying to dabble? Let's figure out what we got. That gives you more of a
Yep.
refreshing like feeling instead of constant isolation. Like, dang, all right, now I got to figure this out. All these people in corporate are here, don't understand me. Like knowing there are other people that have gone through that same journey and they've made it and they're doing it is something that I think is
Mm-hmm.
helpful to the transition. And so what I've kind of just picked up from the conversations I've had is that emotional part is the hardest thing to kind of
Yeah.
jump over.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Like I've noticed like now I've been able to do um I've been able to kind of walk in different spaces since I retired. One of those like wearing the entrepreneur hat with district. Now in this space of being more of in a corporate environment with National Lampoon, still working in a consulting space with FIBA and some of the brands that we deal with, and then still having my physical and mental, all of it in basketball through grassroots. Um, they're all vastly different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Even the ones where I'm connected to basketball directly, they're all vastly different emotional spaces than what we experience playing and living abroad. And even just that in and of itself is an adjustment, like that we're never kind of processed through. Like you got to come home after, and I like,
Mm-hmm.
actually live for the entirety of the year,
Yeah.
which may sound weird to some folks that are not athletes, but that is an adjustment of like not looking at home as the vacation spot. Because
Right.
I looked at coming home as, all right, I'm on vacation for so long because home is wherever
Right.
you are, Europe, South America, wherever you are. So even just that adjustment is a completely different, has you in a completely different emotional space. I was telling a friend of mine, this is the most that I have driven as an adult, like
Mm-hmm.
ever. Because most places I lived abroad, I didn't have to. It
Right.
was either trains or taxis. Is a couple places where I had to have a car, but it was like I'm going to practice, maybe a
Right.
couple spots, and then going home.
The gym, it was
Being
like
back in
quick
LA,
ones
just
or
driving.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yup.
I didn't even think
Yup.
about that.
Just driving.
I was thinking about also the other day of just that feeling of the feelings you have when you're playing, like when you know confidence is lacking, or when you like, man, I need to get, that crippling feeling. I don't know if you ever had it where you just like, now I know I
Yes,
can make this
absolutely.
shot, but it's like, man, you in that state where you gotta try and get out of it, and usually you try to find ways to get out of it. And once you out of it, you back. But those feelings of the ups and downs of being an athlete. And I was wondering,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel those things as an entrepreneur? Because it's weird, because being an athlete is tied to your body. It's tied to being able to
Mm-hmm.
move your body to finish something. Whereas business is more so like you're using your mind, you're using your intellect to
Mm-hmm.
execute what you're trying to do. And so I was wondering, is there, or do you experience anything in the business corporate world like you experienced in sport? And again, whether it be with your confidence, whether it be with just dealing with, you know, different highs and lows of playing and going through hard times,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Do you see a lot of the correlation, or is it a completely different type of emotional roller coaster and battle?
Wow. So it's dynamic in the sense that I felt both things kind of happen, meaning there are a ton of similarities. So if there's big meeting, big event, um, something like that coming up, product release, anything like that happening, then it feels very much like a game. It feels like I kind of feel like I'm back in the season where you had that anticipation, may have a little um, nervousness, if you will, before going into it,
Mm-hmm.
but then you jump into it and it's like you perform. Then there and that is where the closest correlation I would have to basketball and that feeling. The other parts of it though, because they're so new, for me at least, my experience is because they've been new. Um, there's such a 180 from basketball because every day as an entrepreneur, I would feel some sort of nervousness because you never know like
What's gonna
because
happen?
you have to strap. We had a startup. We have a startup, so it isn't anything that like where we just had this massive runway to
Mm-hmm.
just blow money, and so every day you realize every decision has a different weight to it. And the other part is like you're responsible for other human beings. You know, as an athlete, you may not have to deal with it the same way. Like, yes, you want to help your teammates do the best they can, and y'all playing together and playing for each other. But it's different when your decisions like can
Right.
really truly affect some households. So that waking up with that type of responsibility is different too, and it takes some level of like working that out and some endurance and some practice at it to just get used to what that emotional weight feels like. Cause
Mm-hmm.
that is a whole new, for me at least, like I said, it was a whole new responsibility.
What of with entrepreneurship? Of course, athlete entrepreneurship more than an athlete is a big wave right now. Um, Athletes NIL getting paid, brand deals, and I got all this other
Mm-hmm.
stuff going on. So everybody's like trying to start their own thing, even the outside of athletes. Just people in general. Everybody's trying to be an entrepreneur,
Right,
but specifically the
right.
athletes, where now it's being publicized. Kyrie doing this, and he have his own business and media company. LeBron has XYZ, and that message being ran with to everybody, like, oh, you an athlete, you should be doing your brand, you should be having this.
Mm-hmm.
I think, what has
Mm-hmm.
been the reality of what you see um, in the market, or just players that maybe came a little bit before you, or maybe coming right behind you, etc. What is the reality of being an athlete entrepreneur, one, and second, the skills that they always again promote we are this, athletes have learned all this, you have all the skills to be an entrepreneur. They constantly say that. But let's be real. What's the reality of the things that some athletes truthfully have to know they have to prepare for to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
So those kind of two are intertwined, but that's where I wanted to just
Yeah,
get your thoughts on that.
for sure, for sure. That's really dope because like that's one of my missions within basketball, and I say I'm an athlete advocate. Like I get to answer what I mean specifically with this question. And one is I think that and you and I have talked about this. You've heard me say this probably a number of times, which is like more than an athlete is a very interesting statement, and is one that I challenge, like humbly, like not no beef against Brian or any of them. I love everything that they're doing. I challenge in the sense that I think an athlete is already enough. Like I don't think you need to be more than that. The stuff that we learn and what we do as athletes, maybe we don't. Maybe we all have like some uh, group cultural imposter syndrome. But
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that we do as athletes, like most folks couldn't dream of doing, and no disrespect to them, I don't even mean it like that. Just dream of doing is just the number of things we have to consider. Um, in particular, the overseas player, like the
Right.
things that athlete has to consider. Jumping into cultures, business cultures different, living cultures different. What it takes to the discipline it takes to be away from family or your support system. I think that athletes are the perfect makeup. We had a perfect makeup for entrepreneurship. Um, we know what it's like to master ourselves in a way that again not many other sectors in society know how or get a chance to experience. And that is it takes a lot of that. It takes a lot of getting knocked down and knowing how to get up, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just grit. Like that's a grit that's like not really you're not really gonna find in a classroom or in a library. Like that's something where you
Right.
gotta actually experience that, and athletes go through that. So that's one. I think athletes and entrepreneurs is almost the same. It's almost the same thing because you have to be self-guided, self-motivated, self-disciplined in order to be an athlete, in order to be an entrepreneur. Where the reality of it happens though is what I think um, doesn't happen enough for us athletes is that transition, so that there isn't a bridge to show, and there isn't a lexicon to communicate or articulate how what we learn, these wonderful principles and attributes that we gain during our athletic journeys, we don't learn how to translate them
Mm-hmm.
into whatever our next experience is as entrepreneurs. So what doing your work early looks like on the court may not look the same way in tech, or it may not look the same way in um, film and television. It may not look the same
Right.
way in food and beverage. But you do know what doing your work early is, and you understand that principle, and you're capable. So someone just has to show you what that looks like. You mentioned something, we're used to using our bodies as athletes. I had to like learn to flip my switch as an entrepreneur because I wanted to physically, do
Mm-hmm.
everything. I had to learn to delegate in a way. And not
Right.
delegate as like, all right, this, person works for me, but like, no, empower, have better conversations, clearer conversations, um, and really be what I was on the court, which was a point guard. I had to learn how to do that, in this next iteration of my life as an entrepreneur. And so no one ever, well, I shouldn't say no one, but it's very few of us that learn how to take these principles and skills that we acquired in basketball or just as athletes and transfer them to whatever other space in society that or in life that we want to
Right.
embark upon. So that's the one
Yeah.
thing, and that's why I'm so adamant about having a mentor, and just having a support system, especially while you're playing, because they can help with that. Even if they never play basketball, you can start to see draw your own correlations and kind of create your own manual and blueprint for yourself while you're playing.
Right. That delegation one is definitely key because you want to just go do
Ooh, it's
everything
key.
and it's not gonna
Yep,
work. It won't work. You literally have to
it
rely
will
on
not
your
work.
team, empower them, motivate them, let them know the stakes are high, all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. And then if you're working with people that aren't athletes, former athletes, you start to see that thing that athletes have. Some
Mm-hmm.
really don't have that. So now you got to push even
Yeah.
harder. Um, and that's been something I've learned. And again, Dorian Lee, another guest,
Mm-hmm.
NBA, WBA, everything trainer. He said that was one of his biggest things starting his training company was he had to learn how to delegate. He couldn't do everything on his own. He
Yep.
had to build a team. And so I think that's a big one. But definitely knowing what skills translate over to entrepreneurship and being able to actually like say, okay, this is how it goes, and having that bridge, like you said, I think that's key because players, even me, I hear it all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'm even like, okay, I know because I'm doing it that yeah, I can see where it's helping, but then still, there's sometimes I'm like, what are they talking? Like what are they talking about exactly?
Mm-hmm.
And those things could definitely help, due to the fact of athletes, due to the fact that athletes might not know their value or might be too humble or might imposter syndrome, etc. Let's
Mm-hmm.
touch upon, again, the culture vulture term is something that's
Mm-hmm.
been around in the music industry more so than sport
Yes.
industry. They more
Yes.
so talk about it. But do you think culture vultures for first of all have always been in sport, but now with the boom of brands, NIL, um, people understanding that athletes are more than just one dimensional. Now they like, oh, they can actually go do this, get in business, be investors, get equity this
Mm-hmm.
way. Do you think that's opened up the gate even more for culture vultures in a sense? Even though athletes are taking more ownership, saying, I want to own this, I want to do this. However, due to that bridge not being there, really understanding your worth and really understanding the value you're bringing to that table, is there an element where you think athletes are still kind of losing to those that are just there to kind of really tap into the culture and extract what they can, due to the fact that maybe we still don't really fully know the value we're really putting into different situations?
Yeah, I think like just off the rip, it doesn't even matter how much you know. Let me just say, just the landscape of of basketball being a multi-billion-dollar industry, and then the dynamic of the relationship athletes have with that industry is typically one of, and I hate to get really political here, but it is what it is. Like, it's one of the worker. Um, we very rarely own anything, whether it's the the company, the brand, whether it's the team organization. Um, it's rare that we have ownership in these things. So because we don't, it's up to us to be able to field what opportunities make the most sense. But just the dynamic of that already, where the masses of us don't own anything. The dynamic is one that makes it easier for a culture vulture to enter into the space. We can know it's a culture vulture, and still it's like, man, this opportunity is one that still can benefit me, even in dealing with a culture vulture. Like, that's the dynamic that we typically have. Unfortunately, right? Like, we play for teams that that's our dynamic. So before we even get to the brands and et cetera, we play for teams that we don't own, and it just is going to always be a very interesting relationship between athlete and industry. It just is. But moving forward, like, there are ways to better assess the athlete's value and the quote unquote power that an athlete has. And it is in their starts, in my opinion, it starts in their ability to play. It starts in their labor, and it ends with their personality. And being able to take advantage of that, obviously just depends. Like I said, depends on those two things. and is determined by the market. So just that's a much bigger conversation, because who you are and what market
Right.
changes is malleable. What opportunities present themselves? Like there are some college athletes that have much more marketability as college athletes than they would as pros. So it's really having to be honest with yourself and understand that. But that's really where the power lies, is in how much information do you have, and can you get. And again, that's always weird because of the athlete dynamic with the industry, because we can't always get all of the information from teams or brands, or some of these other corporations, and we're the ones generating a lot of the data and still can't get this information. So it's always going to be a really interesting dynamic, but informing yourself on what market you're in, what value you then have in that market, and utilizing your relationships to see how you can leverage that value that you created for yourself in that particular market. Those are the three places you have to start before you can even begin to move or even consider a culture vulture, or you're already kind of food anyway.
I know you a while back, years ago, early in the Wevolve journey, you were like, "Hey, these people take a call and keep taking calls to extract any type of IP, any type of insights,
Yes.
etc." And so I think one thing I just wanted you to just give a quick note on, because I think I see it all the time. Even the simple fact of a intro. How many players give a, hey, can I
Mm.
get her number? Can I get this? Can I get that? And understand. For me, it's understanding the difference between you paid the agent to work for you. You doing those things are not
Mhm.
like, oh, I need to do this because he got me a job. Like understanding that difference. Like he got his 10% commission for doing his job. You no longer owe that person nothing. Now, of course, you have a good relationship with your agent. You're going to do it, etc. But it's just making sure you understand the difference. But it could be as simple as that, or of course, even more, something telling people deeper things like what's the real pain points, truthfully, of the athletes, like what's really going on in our community. Those things are very, very valuable, and I learn it more when I talk to individuals that are trying to build that aren't from the culture and they haven't been a player, and that key insight can make or break what they do and what they build and how they strategically move. How do, that alone, how do players start
Mhm.
to pay attention to that, and how can they make that something they monetize? Not just trying to be a brand and trying to do all those things, but what about the other side that maybe is more valuable when you're retired and you're no longer on the court? You still have that part. So I just wanted to touch upon that part because that's something that probably kind of it stays with you even when you no longer have that brand
Mhm.
to use because you're no longer playing.
Yes, man. I think that's the importance of what you and Julie are doing with Weave, because the first thing I would turn to is community, and that's retired athletes that are working with brands, that are just retired athletes. Period. That's current athletes. That's the collegiate ones who are trying to become pro. When you're able to get um, all of these different perspectives, you're able to start to identify your value, because these people have case studies and experiences for you to glean from. And that's still me, even as a retired athlete. Like I still get a chance to talk to like some of my young homies that's like breaking through now as pros, and getting to see just how much the the language hasn't changed, even though there's more money kind of moving around. I even still have some relevance in just being able to share with them, like, don't go left, don't go right. Look at these things, consider these things, because I've gone through them. It helps to understand, for a player to understand their value, so that they're not being mined for everything that's valuable within them. Because you said it, like somebody will sit on the phone, and I've been that person. I had to learn the hard way, like sitting on the phone, um, giving away all the jewels, typically out of thinking I'm, being a good homie, or uh, really maybe haven't been heard. So somebody taking an interest in my journey, there's a number of reasons why I've done it, why I've seen others do it, and they just offer up, a relationship that typically at the end of the day may generate millions of dollars in revenue for an agent or for a brand. And so having to to think in that way, you first have to step outside of just, oh, I'm only a basketball player, or I'm only here to play basketball. And again, being able to have a community of people around you that have done it, um, that have been through it, that have fallen on their face, and more importantly, that are willing to be transparent and vulnerable with you and tell you where they've fallen on their face, and also share where they've succeeded, is super important. It's super
Yeah.
important. Otherwise, the cycle just continues.
I mean, it's also like, how do you set that up? Is it just as basic as like, hey, we teaching everybody, here's a template consultancy agreement. When they hit you up, tell them, hey, book this, how much that 30 minutes costs. Like what does that look like? Because we can tell players, as you know, one of the girls that was with one of the data analytics company back in the day. Now, he has investment with a new venture in data, backed by a investor that is a big name. I won't put it out there. Now she has no job with that individual. She's now doing something else. And it's like, but the connections she brought to the table, huge connections, international connections from her experience, nothing. So it's like, how do you set it up to make sure you don't get bamboozled or got whatever term we want to use? Like, what's, they can say, okay, Jory, I hear you, but okay, what am I going to do? That's kind of, I guess, the next step.
It is being able to, yes, and it is being able to mold a relationship to your liking, and being able to assess like how invested you want to be in a relationship. That will determine how you can structure that from a business standpoint. I've been able to do it in some ways just as a consultant, where I do want to go on that journey, so that I walk through proof of concept with the team, and developing or researching case studies to help them build out a product or a service. And that may have in it, as far as the deal structure goes, it may be stair step to where it's salary at the beginning, or it's points on the deal. It may be points on the deal of a relationship, depending on what that product or service is. Because I've done some consulting with an accounting agency that manages wealth, so it's just percentages on relationships that I would bring to the table. It can also look like equity, especially if you're assisting a startup company that's looking for funding, or they're in their research and development phase, and they need access to not only what you mentally have, but relationships. And like when they start getting into that phase of things, and then you can have an equity conversation with them around percentages of ownership. So it typically just depends on what the nature of that relationship is and how you want to mold it.
Right.
But definitely setting healthy business boundaries is important. You got to be comfortable saying no. Got to be comfortable respecting yourself and not feeling like, man, if I don't do this, it'll mess the relationship up. My agent won't do this, that, or the third. Like, that's one of the things that I had to get over for myself, and I see a lot of players have to get over, is feeling like they're indebted to a person or a relationship, to where they can't set a healthy business boundary around who they are, what they provide outside of what they do on the court. And you got to be able to say no. And the reason why I say, being able to say no is because it'll very quickly, the conversation or relationship will very quickly get to a point that's hard to come back from, where you've already made an introduction, or you've already said, yo, I got you, or whatever. And you got to be comfortable having those tough conversations, those healthy boundary conversations. And they're not easy. Like I said, I've seen a ton of people, myself included, break down right at that point where they should just go, you know what? Like we need to, before we move any further here, we need to talk about how I can participate on the upside of this venture.
Hmm.
Like
Right.
simple.
And cause
And
they gonna do it.
I had to learn that. Oh,
Yeah.
because they gonna do it.
Oh
They gonna
yeah,
do.
the
They
other
gonna
side
do
of
it.
the table gonna be quick to say what they want and what they're not doing and all of that.
Yep.
So it's,
Yep.
you know, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a topic that I think is very important because it's a part where I think a lot of athletes could generate some extra income when it pertains to
Oh,
consultancy.
absolutely.
And that was one of the topics to transition into the Nike Win program. Not that
Mm.
not no hit at Nike. I think it's a wonderful program. I think
Yeah.
they definitely building some athlete brand loyalty through it because no other brand like that is stepping up to help
Hmm.
athletes transition in the way that they're doing it.
Hmm.
But I think it's a very smart move. Again, when we talk about IP insights, and you get in some of the best
Hmm.
athletes, a lot of them that they have in the program that I see have played all over the world,
Hmm.
overseas athletes. I don't know if Adidas or
Yes.
anybody gonna be able to catch up once they analyze all this, if they are getting the information from the athletes the right way. But I'm like, I don't know. Like, and if Adidas taking this long and all of them taking this long to create their own
Hmm.
programs, I don't know what they're doing or if they're not paying attention. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on the Nike Win program. I think they were supposed to start. I just know basketball, the women are doing it, but I think they starting to get volleyball women, etc. Um,
Mm.
in light of women's sports
All
about
right.
the boom, it's like it's not a rocket
Yep.
science. So I don't know what the other brands doing, but I'm like, hey,
Man.
what is clear right in front of their face. So just wanted to, as we
I
talk about
think.
extracting
Yeah.
IP, all of that, just kind of what that program is doing and what you think about that.
I think it's brilliant on Nike's part. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I think the other brands are falling asleep at the wheel a little bit, to not, like, to your point, to not be um, having a program like the Win program of their own. Um, One, like, women typically are at the forefront of any type of change or revolution when it comes to like the world, American society in general, but definitely sports. Um, like, the women's side is typically more innovative. So me as a business person would be doing the exact same thing. To
Mm-hmm.
your point, like, women's basketball and women's sports in general is about to boom. Like, it's right on the precipice of booming. So why would you not? Like, why would you not be facilitating these minds that have experienced this and that have in many ways pioneered what is happening in women's sports, and more specifically women's basketball. So um, I would love to believe Nike is just doing this altruistically
Mm-hmm.
to where it's just like out of the pureness of their heart. I do think there are some people there that genuinely do care about women's basketball and women's sports. But from a business standpoint, it is one of the smartest business moves I think Nike has made, and that's just across the board. Like you said, if they're stepping into volleyball as well, and don't like pickleball, and if they're like digging really deep roots into this, to your point, if they're doing this the right way, where they are allowing these women to inform their decisions,
Mm-hmm.
then we're gonna see Nike take off in a way that these other brands won't even be able to catch up. Like, even and they're behind now, in my opinion, they really won't be able to catch up. They'll be multiple years behind. So I think it's a brilliant program. Like I said, if I'm running Nike, I would be doing the same thing. I would
Mm-hmm.
be throwing a ton of money at people like yourself and Julie. Like, what do y'all need to um, be a part of the Nike family and help steer this thing in the right direction? Like, it's brilliant.
Yeah. No, I think it's yeah. I mean, again, you have truthfully, players in a tough situation trying to transition, and you come and you offer them
Hmm.
this opportunity to work for Nike. You know, learn so much within the 2 years. I think they have the program there. be there in that ecosystem in the offices. Like if you don't come out when like I was like, dang, Julie, I might need to go ahead and do it because like and
Yeah.
there's no way if you in that ecosystem and apparently you get the option to kind of like choose and dabble where you want to go. I'm like, that's a playground. If the athlete is going also prepared, like I'm about to go in here and extract just as much as I'm gonna put in. It's a great
Yep.
opportunity, I think. And yeah, I'm like, I give, obviously, I also see what they can extract, but
hmm
I applaud them with the program, and I was like, I hope, Ami Leon, come on, dude, they need to start something because that's the first one I'm signing up for.
Yeah, absolutely,
I'm like,
absolutely.
yo, that's
That
the
would be
shoot. If I
so
had to
great.
pick, I
Yeah,
had to
them,
pick a
them and New
brand.
Balance, right?
Right. I'm like,
Yep.
shoot, they got the grassroots. That's, the nonprofit part of Evolve. That's the whole grassroots is the whole concept. I'm like, man, that is the brand. I'm telling you, just need to get that connection.
Yep.
But I think it's, yes, the brand thing for players who get the deals and endorsements is great, but just to kind of bring it back, like the brands needing individuals to come in and help them
hmm
storytell, help them do those things. That's another opportunity for players that, okay, you're not getting an endorsement, but you can still go in and work with these brands and have a position. And I think um, that's something that's missed with all of this stuff going on. Even myself, like women's sports booming
hmm
and brand deals, and it's like you start to think, dang, I ain't getting no endorsements. Dang, I wish I would have got NIL, but it's like, no, it's still good. My experience being a woman, that means a
hmm
lot more job opportunities are coming. How do I set
hmm
myself up to be in those spaces now, even though I'm not in the space as the talent? Um, and that's back to like, again, what is the brand sponsorship world really look
hmm
like, and what's really needed in those spaces for players that might want to go into it and really work in those spaces.
Yeah, the brand sponsorship piece, especially as talent, is never what is being like. It's not in my experience what's being hyped at the moment. There are a few athletes, as we know, that high visibility um, is that's typically where the dollars go to. That's where they're
Mm-hmm.
circulated. Thinking that you can just go to a bigger name school and you're gonna independently get these brand deals is still few and far between. A thing that I've seen that has been encouraging though is these coalitions that are happening around, like these athlete coalitions at the schools around NIL. So they're basically kind of packaging themselves up as athletes. I think that's amazing. I honestly feel like that's a bit slept on. I'm gonna say it out loud, hoping that only the authentic people are listening to this, so no one starts to get wise about it. But I think those coalitions actually gonna turn into like unions,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we're gonna start seeing some tremendous progress on the athlete side from these coalitions. So I love to see that. I don't think it's small in any way that these things are
Mm-mm.
happening around NIL, because they'll once you put these coalitions together, you now have to start going to meetings a little bit more. You start following, well, okay, well, where's our money at, and it becomes this think tank in a way too of educating the athletes. So I'm excited about those, but just independently, uh, the brands typically go after the higher visibility athlete because eyeballs is where they place their the bulk of their
Right.
marketing dollars or their NIL money. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So the other
Group.
side is what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was saying the other side of what you're saying though is something that I would encourage players, whether you're college or pro. That other side is, what could you do not as the talent? So if you're not in front of the camera, if you're not at some activation signing autographs somewhere, but you're behind the scenes and you're able to become an apprentice of some sort, in return for offering your perspective or your experiences or your insight as an athlete, I honestly feel like that has the more longevity to it, and has more sustainability in you developing a career out of it than even just being the talent in front of the camera getting an NIL deal. So I would actually encourage more athletes to go the most notable one was Darius Baisley. What Rich Paul did with him at New Balance. Like, okay, we're gonna, whether they actually did it or not, right? Like, just still go over here. You're gonna be an intern for a year. Learn whatever element of the business you want, whether it's marketing, PR, um, like the storytelling side of it, whatever you're gonna jump into, do that while lending um your visibility to the brand. Uh, I would go that route. I would absolutely encourage people. I honestly think there's more value to be given and to be had going that route. So if you can find that along your path, jump into that immediately.
Right. Yeah. One, the group licensing is the move for the majority of athletes. So that's what the coalitions are really doing. That's what even the bigger unions are trying to, that's what they after. They need the members to sign over those rights so they can do group licensing deals. The
Yeah.
key is making sure the leaders of whoever over these coalitions are doing the deals correctly and in the best interest of the
Properly.
athlete.
Yeah.
Because, NBA Top Shot was a terrible deal. The EA Sports deal that one team did was not a great deal. They're on blast for that. So now it's another thing. Like, okay, yeah, players are signing and doing deals together, but now who's doing the deal, and are you getting the best end of the stick? And so it is coming.
Right.
College Football Player Association is they're about to move. They're doing some things with Winners Alliance, which is tied to the Players Tennis Association. So it's definitely coming. I think that next step is having some clear understanding of who's leading it and are they going to really do the deal when they're sitting at that table in the best interest of athletes. The other part I think of group licensing is not only just doing these deals, but tying in things like, all right, we're going to do this deal and we want 100 slots of internships for our players or 50 or whatever it might be. Like now put that in the deal. Like, we need this. Like, let's start getting more creative with what we put in the deal. And, that's something, we think is opportunity. And you don't have to be a coalition or a union to do that. You could be an independent entity that gets athletes to say, hey, I want you to have the rights to my likeness, image, etc. And do deals on our behalf. So I think it's definitely something people sleeping on. Everybody's really focused on how do we get one athlete tied to a brand. If I'm a brand, truthfully, I don't think it makes sense. Certain brands, it makes sense. But if those individual athletes in certain markets aren't united in how they post and how they're engaging with their marketing strategy, then I don't think it makes sense. Now, if you get 10 of us who plan overseas in 4 different countries and 10 of us are strategically posting at the same time consistently for this 1 week, I would put my money on that. And that's what I think.
Now you're talking impact. Yeah, now you're talking making impact.
I think it's just a little different. But I think, it's catching on. But again, people are still caught on that one athlete NIL deal. And that's kind of what it is. But then for the athlete, like you said, finding opportunities to work and provide value in other ways, and that might take the ego part. Going back to that ego, like, you not that dude. You the one that's about to carry the water or something. Can you do that?
Right.
That's another part, I guess, of the transition.
Yes, and it's not. Again, I would say, I know it's not easy, because it isn't even about the fanfare part of it all the time. It is, to your point, the nature of the work changes, and you are possibly carrying water. I'll say this though, man. It's because I went that route, just as an entrepreneur now, even working more in the corporate space. It is it is the side that more athletes need to be on, that have a mind for and a heart for current athletes. And I say that as a retired athlete, obviously, but even if you're still playing, like, that's the side that you want to be on. Like I said, it's the one that has um, the most sustainability and most longevity in it, in my opinion. And that's, you can do that as an entrepreneur. You can do that, tied into a brand, but not being talented and not being on on the front. Yes, it's gonna take a little bit of you swallowing your pride and that ego, but you gain a lot of real authority and power on that side, in really being able to shift culture and direct culture.
Hmm. When it pertains to just how the sports landscape is shifting in general, of course you've been in different spaces with district consulting, the creative side. What do you see for athletes that, again, we got some that's probably not even thinking about transitioning, going to hear the podcast, but for those that, they pondering on it, or some, truthfully, I do have some in the Weave community that's early on, and they really, if they had that opportunity, they would dip. So, so right now with
Yeah.
everything going on in sport, um, I heard someone talk about, like entertainment and movies and all of that is going to become so kind of generic. It's not going to be able to feed that emotional
Hmm.
high for people, because with AI and all of that, it's going to be real hard for someone to create content that's really going to change. But sports, that live sports element will always give you like the highs, the lows, the love, the cries, and all of that will forever be around, which is a great thing for us as current and former athletes. What you've seen through your time of entrepreneurship and working in the sports space, what are some of the key things you think players should really just be aware of when they're thinking about what they're going to do next, and understand that there's a lot of opportunity for them, and they just got to find their space.
Yeah, I would say, like, it being able to assess, a skill set that you have, or a talent that you have that you genuinely love, um, and finding some time while you're able to travel, while you're playing, to do a lot of self discovery, because that's gonna be the thing that you actually want to uh, embark upon and pursue life after. Like, because yes, money's necessary. I would never be the person to be like, money ain't important and all that, but chasing money is gonna be difficult. Chasing industry trends is gonna be difficult, because stuff changes. As we know, it changes so quickly, um, in the world that we live in our society we live in. All that stuff changes. So if you're a storyteller, or you like storytelling, um, like, jump in that vein as quickly as you possibly can. And that's where I say you start to tap into mentors in your community as much as possible, reaching back to old coaches, your old colleges, etc. If you um, if you have a proclivity for architecture and real estate, like, find that thing, because seriously, whatever it is, find that thing that you know that you're drawn to already as an athlete, and just start reading up on it, start tapping into your community within that, because that's where you're going to be successful. Like, that's where you're going to find the true success. And by success, I don't, like, yes, money's a part of that, but you're going to find something the way that you love, that you do with basketball, something that you can get up and do every day, and it really not feel like work. Because that's what I think makes athletes special too. I think that's what makes the transition difficult for some, is that
Hmm.
we found something that we love and can do, and explore all parts of us, within this game, and transitioning out of it, things don't always tap into every bit of us that we've been able to exercise throughout our careers. So the quicker you can assess and find that thing that's that's going to give you gratification beyond the money, beyond any status, just something you can wake up and do, because we're craftspeople. Athletes we're craftsmen and women. It just is what it is. Like that's what makes us athletes in general. Our craft is just a basketball, or it's volleyball, or it's a golf club, or what have you. But we love detail in a different way than people in society do. So, really, really taking time to reflect on that. That's why I love the gentleman that you said took a year off and just went surfing. That's something that I wish I would have done. Not in particular the surfing, but just taking a year off. Instead, I jumped right into business. But like, I wish I would have taken a year off myself and just maybe traveled a little bit more, or took a year and just read, and just did some like true self discovery with not being, because I did it while I was playing, but like, okay, there is no basketball to distract me. Let me just really, who is Horace Wormely? Like, let me take time to really figure that out, find out what I love, and then jump into that in a more professional sense, if that's something I decide to do. Luckily for me, I was able to find it, but still something that I would encourage people to do is don't skip that part, because the blessing is we have the rest of our lives to live a whole nother life apart from basketball, because you don't need
Right.
basketball anymore. And that was
Yeah.
a thought for me that was like mind blowing a bit. Like, wait, I don't have to, do anything in basketball. I don't have to be connected to it. I don't have to see a court anymore, and I'm still good. But you won't know that if you don't take some time to like really do some self discovery, because that's where you'll be the most successful, all the way around, emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. So that's where I would start and finish. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely. I haven't done the full year off yet. I still pondered on going to Cyprus or something and still hooping like once a day. But we'll see what happens.
I still need my year. I need my year off. I'm gonna find it somewhere. I'm going to Paris. I'm gonna just, y'all ain't gonna be able to find me. I still need my year somewhere.
Man, man. Um, One of the home another good homeboy, good brother, Jarek. He once told me, when talking about Revolve, of course, he was like, "Look, basketball is the culture of sport. It leads everything that people do. You like, again, you don't see people wearing Ronaldo sneakers with they stuff. You see them wearing Jordans. You see
Right.
even people wearing LeBrons, even though
Right.
like they taking it too far. I just don't think LeBron should be worn with jeans, but they doing it. Um, Basketball is the culture. And then if you go deeper, what is people of color that are dominating basketball? So that means our people, in a sense, are at the forefront of a lot of these brands. When I come overseas, it's interesting. The models of some of these high fashion brands are people of color, and it's kind of like, what is going on? It's interesting because I know who's buying those aren't mostly people of color, so it's kind of like, okay, but I'm sure they're still selling. So when it pertains to our community, our black community, what are some of the things that in sports specifically that you think we need to really get better at and like really start to pay attention to when it pertains to the business side of sport, and just how much we can flip that leverage that we have because we are kind of at the forefront in the face of a lot of this stuff? How can we kind of flip that to really use it in our favor for some things that last?
Man, so that, like, I know that this will be uh, a plan that will take some time, but from my perspective, I believe it's being able to control, and I use that word lightly or with measure, but manage, control our pipelines a little bit better in sports. Meaning, from grassroots all the way to college, even the pro level. I think we give away not only our information, which you and I have talked about here quite a bit, but we give away our kids to these programs really early that don't have our best interest at heart. And on one side, which both sides are important. One side is community, and one side is business. But on the communal, like, to me, they should intersect at all times. But I know I'm also super optimistic in that way. But um, on the community side, when we take our kids out of our community and our local schools, our local programs are not good enough for whatever reason, we detach the kid from understanding or being able to uh, build relationships with the store clerk or the store owners in their neighborhood, allowing parents and family members to support them a bit easier, corral around them. Like, we lose a lot of cultural connectivity and communal connectivity when we send our kids away a lot of times to private schools, suburbs, and we're disintegrated at that point. So it starts really early, where our communities are just being severed. And I'm only just talking our basketball communities being severed really early. And on the business side, once that happens, I'm able to isolate you from your community, so I can tell you anything just about. If it look good on the surface, it sound good in the moment, if you don't have your community to, like, cross-reference things or leverage, like, hey, there's 10 of us here, and, like, we're gonna walk into this club or this school or this brand as a unit, we lose a lot of our leverage. Kind of going back to what I was saying before, because we don't own these things, or we don't control these things. We typically don't run the programs, the AAU programs, all the way out, especially the higher profile ones. We don't own or operate or manage these schools. And so by the time we get to the pro level, it's a little too late. Like, we start to see kids becoming adults, one, maybe not maturing all the way because they've been coddled and just kind of pushed along this conveyor belt and not challenged by what I think our community would challenge them in healthy ways. That's not happening. They're just being pacified, so they become athletes, become adults, and don't have all the tools that adults should have. Really, you just play basketball, or that kid has no interest in their community, so they're pretty much isolated, and they just are now tapping into whatever resources is available to them, and there any hope for reciprocity for investment to go back into community is gone, because there's no connectivity. So by the time you get to this pro level, we've lost so much along the journey, or along this conveyor belt. It's hard to then even trying to convince some athletes to, hey, let's stick together.
Right.
And I think that'll be our downfall until we find a way to, like, really band together. And it doesn't, to me, unity doesn't mean uniformity all the time. It just means, how can we come to some sort of consensus? We don't all have to go to the same private school, public school, but, like, how do we come to some sort of consensus? I think the AAU programs are a big piece of that. I think parents developing some sort of coalition and talking together becomes some sort of piece of that. But we have to find some way to develop consensus or some sort of boundary around our communities. Otherwise, we'll keep being picked off and mined as black and brown folk, people of color. We'll continue to get picked off.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's it right there. And I think the thing is, whether it be sport or just in general, we know it. Now it's just like, how do we do it? How do we start to actually execute what we all know we need to do? And that's I guess that's just like you say, it's gonna take time, one step at a time. I don't know what it is, man, but
yeah.
it needs.
It's a daunting task, but you're doing it. You and Julie are doing it, and we've all. I think these conversations that we're having, that I know that you have pretty often, are important. Like, they're not for nothing. I think that we need more of them. I think they need to become more official and more formal. I think we need more athlete seminars where it's just athletes. And if we don't do nothing but just share stories, horror stories, success stories, I think we will find out just how much we have in common, and that we just didn't know that there was help out there, or that something could be done, because we're not having enough official, formal conversations. I think being able to
Yeah.
start there is huge, and that's why what you and Julie do, what We Evolve is so big, it's so important.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and we gotta. Yeah, it's a mix too, and not everybody has a heart for athlete empowerment, athlete
Yeah,
advocacy, and so that's that too.
yeah,
Because there's a
very
few
true.
players that are in the Adidas, they are in these brands, and they are former athletes.
Hmm.
Maybe some D1s that I know of, and some that play pro. But again, then you get caught up in not remembering and
In the
just
machine,
being in that
in the
space, and
machine.
then when someone like me come talking, hey, like, can you beat our entry point? Can you, you just following the scheme, the normal everyday thing, as if I wasn't, in your shoes at some point. And that's the part where it's
Right.
like, yeah, maybe the stories, these seminars, all that stuff matters, because then you won't lose touch. As they say, keep,
Yep.
don't lose touch. Stay connected
Yep.
to the streets, as they say. Um, the last one that I just want to just touch upon is really, how do you
Yep.
define athlete advocacy? How do you define athlete empowerment um, in your own way? Because I know a lot of the things you wanted to create when you were playing, just thinking about stuff that you probably still haven't touched from your black book, that and some of them
Yeah.
had to do with athlete empowerment and really improving the industry for the athlete and their well-being. But how do you really, what's your definition of athlete empowerment?
Yeah. Athlete empowerment for me is uh, being able to have a very, and this may be lofty, and I'll jump into it, but uh, being able to have a very clear perspective on the landscape that you're entering into, having a clear vision of what you want to get out of it, and having a clear plan of how you're going to execute that. Those three things, and I've said them in other ways. I've kind of mentioned them in the sense of knowing your value as an athlete, knowing your value within a particular marketplace as an athlete, and then knowing how to leverage that value that you created for yourself in a particular marketplace. And that could be where you're playing, that could be with a particular brand. I pull that lens back and I say it again. It's being clear on the landscape of basketball specifically, or whatever your sport is, that industry, having a clear vision of what you want to get out of this thing, and having clear steps on how to execute that. Because we're not going to overthrow the owners at any point, nor am I trying to. But and we're not going to overthrow agents. We're not going to overthrow these different countries. Like, we're going to have to find our way back to uh, some sort of equity, some dynamic of equity. And I think the piece that doesn't fully understand that yet is the athlete. I think the owners, agents, um, even some of the trainers, and let's call them GMs, that side, the suits, if you will, they understand why they're in this. They understand their value. They understand what they provide. So it's sometimes where if they feel like they're doing us a disservice, they're not doing us a disservice. We're doing ourselves a disservice because we're not clear about things. we're not clear. We don't have a clear understanding of the landscape that we're entering into. We don't have a clear understanding of our value and how to execute that. And so empowerment starts there with being clear, gaining clarity, getting information, getting knowledge, understanding uh, yourself and what you can tolerate, what you won't tolerate, and then being able to connect the dots with the community that you have. And so for me, hopefully that spelled out what athlete advocacy, what empowerment looks like for me. That's the empowerment part. Advocacy is connecting those dots for a player, because all of that I said can sound very general, and it is very general and lofty. But being able to sit down with the player and help them be specific. If a player is to, or player, platform, company, I feel like I can do this at various levels, but I'll just use a player for example. If they're telling me, hey, I don't really care about the prestige of this, I want to jump in and I want to travel, I want to play 10 years, and I want to be able to leverage the 10 years that I play into a career that allows me to only write when I'm done. Then, bet. My job now as an advocate isn't to tell them, nah, you crazy, bro. You supposed to go play for Real Madrid, and you supposed to think, go
Right.
playing for, Maccabi Tel Aviv. Like, that ain't my job as an advocate. This player, this person has told me what they want to do. My job is now, all right, well, let me see if I can find the resources to help you understand what that may take. Let me find the resources to, to help you navigate what that journey may look like. Playing maybe you want to play in smaller country or smaller teams. You don't want to deal with the stress of whatever. My job then is just, how do I connect these dots with the resources that I have?
Right.
And I've sat down with a number of players, a number of platforms, businesses that are, people that are former athletes or current athletes bring to the table. And that's one of my gifts as a strategist is just, all right, well, let's sit down and figure this thing out. Let's figure out, like, what's the best strategy for you to execute exactly what you just said, and let me make sure you have a realistic vision on this. And I think it starts there. All the other pieces, it can get heavy, and that kind of gets into where you and I are comfortable having those conversations where we start talking about data, and we start
Right.
talking about kind of taking on the owners and stuff like that. That's a very very special group that can do that. But in general, man, my love for athletes is, man, let me just make this to how do I help you to get the most out of this journey and this career, while you're bouncing this basketball. If I can help you do that and you walk away with, like, yo, that was an awesome experience, I can roll this into the next iteration or transition of my life. That to me is the most important thing
Yep. No, I,
as
I
far as
think
being an
that's
athlete
that's
advocate.
yeah, that's perfect. I think for
Mm.
sure, because athlete advocacy is like, I think that's just wholeheartedly, genuinely wanting players to be able to leverage the game and kind of use that time to the best of their abilities to optimize everything they possibly can, to not lose anything from the experience and not leave, bitter or whatever at the industry, because like you said before, the industry working the way it need to work for certain groups, because if it wasn't, then they'll be trying to figure out how to shift it. So we
Yep.
can't be mad at
Yep.
them because something working for them.
Yep.
There is nowhere in the world that if something worked for somebody, they gonna say, well, you know what? Let me take a
Let me
5
stop
steps
this.
back to help this person. No, that's not how it works. So if athletes,
Yep.
first we have to step up for ourselves and say we want more, we demand more. And then, like you said, athlete
Yes.
advocacy is really saying, I want to, I want to become, a travel expert or something. Boom. How can I do that? And let's strategically. That's the other key word, strategy. Strategically plan out your career is the next thing that I think is key for athlete advocacy. Is like, let's help players like really understand and strategically know, which I think leads to better confidence, or maybe not taking a certain deal because you're more sure of what your plan is. So now no agent, there's no situation that's going to just get you tied in because you're scrambling. Now it's like, no, this is my plan. This is what I want. Can you offer this? Can you offer a piece of that? And when more athletes are moving in that way with a strategic mindset, still loving the game, still doing it, now you will see the whole industry elevate in our favor, I think. And that's why I think athlete empowerment and athlete advocacy both are really big topics and things we need to pay attention to, even though the words are thrown around a lot. But I'm not sure if everyone's committed to the same, vision that a few of us have.
Yeah, you have to strongly consider that, as every athlete doesn't want to be an entrepreneur, do the sexy thing and become a GM or own a team or move the culture forward, but helping that athlete who literally does want to come home and just be a teacher, that's shaping and shifting the culture just as much as Brian getting the shoe. Like it really does. And it's not the sexy thing. It's not the thing that may get the write ups and social media and all of that. But somebody being able to transition out of their sport into something that they genuinely love and have planned to do and get the most out of their career is humongous, because they're going to be the person that you're able to call back and say, hey, can you come speak to, this athlete here and talk to them about how they can transition and life is still wonderful and is the ease of it and et cetera. Because there's a ton of people who, bought into the more than the athlete and wanted to build their own production company and follow in the footsteps of Brian, and they stressed it the hell out because somebody told them that that's what they needed to do or have to do, and that's not at all what you need to do, have to do as an athlete to be more than an athlete or be successful or move the culture forward. Everything doesn't have to be that. So until I think we have that mindset, that holistic mindset, we won't really be able to genuinely talk about athlete advocacy.
Yep.
Or does everything have to be, sexy? So yeah.
Right. And having that time, that clarity to know that I started Evolve from me sitting reading and wasn't even thinking truthfully entrepreneurship. It was like, well, this is the way for me to execute how I want to give back to the community, how I want to leave an impact in sport. And over time, it was clear that, okay, this actually, other things I want to do that I knew I would like to do when I'm done, I can also do that with Evolve. And it wasn't nothing that someone was pushing me or I saw like, oh, athlete entrepreneurship, I should do that. I think when you really start to sit and figure out what you want to do, then you kind of have that clarity to be like, okay, I want to go in this direction. And then taking the time to really understand that, what that direction entails and being clear on that. I think the first time I talked to you, I was like, this is 15, 20 years. She was already down for hammock life. I'm like, so that part wasn't a problem for her. She already was like, we could couch surf for 5-6 years and hammock, we'll be fine. So it's really understanding the good, the bad, what could happen. Are we ready? Are we good for that? Yes. And it's like, cool, you good? Yes. I'm good. Let's go. And there's something really beautiful in that, to then say, okay, let's go do it and go from there. But per usual, Horace, I mean, of course we could touch on so many different topics, but
I know.
Appreciate your time, the wisdom, and everything. Obviously, Hope you're doing good, the family doing good, and everything with the
Yes,
new
yes.
journey that you taking is going well. I'm sure you're learning stretching again, so you know,
Yeah.
that journal gonna be worth gold. That's gonna be like the Black album. That journal that you got over there. I'm gonna wait on that one. About 20 years when you
Absolutely.
drop that.
Absolutely. I'm working on it. I already got the title. It's gonna be like my like Victory Lap. How Nipsey was just working on Victory Lap forever. I've been working on KYP, Know Your Personnel. That's my book, man. I've been working on
Yeah.
that forever. But definitely appreciate you, Jory. Always. This is always like therapy for me, being able to talk to you about state of affairs and just life in general. So shout out to you and Julie and what y'all doing over at Weevolve, man. I can't wait to the world sees what y'all doing. I've been able to get a peek behind the curtain, but I can't wait till everybody gets to see what you guys are doing, because it's gonna be revolutionary. So appreciate you.